Hello, everyone, and welcome along to a Split Opinions podcast on the Blood Red channel, courtesy of the Liverpool Echo, with me, your host, Patrick Smith. And I'm delighted to be joined by the Liverpool Echo's last man standing on the desk, seemingly during the summer, in Theo Squires. Theo, how are you doing?
I'm getting there. A bit tired. Managed to get a few transfers out of it so far, haven't we? Not what you wanted to hear when Liverpool said the business is done for the summer, but I'm sure Emmet's going to try and convince them otherwise. We'll see. But yeah, we're getting there.
We are in the opposition dugout today for the Split Opinion. We've got Emmet Gates of Liverpool.com. Emmet, how's things?
Yeah, doing good. Looking forward to this discussion with Theo and see where it takes us.
Yeah, lovely stuff. Well, it's going to be a very simple pod today. It's going to centre around Liverpool's transfer business. And the simple question is, do Liverpool need to sign more players this transfer window? Theo, let's come to you first, and I'm going to ask you that simple initial question. Do Liverpool need more players? We've seen Nunes, Ramsey and Carvalho come in. Do you think that'll be all?
Yeah, I think that will be it from the club. Maybe there might be an opportunistic opportunity later in the summer that we've seen them willing to do before, like when they signed Luis Diaz 6 months early. But as it stands, that seems like that's it. And you're looking at it, that should be enough. The players they've lost, Mane, Origi, Minamino looks set to follow. Nico Williams and Nat Phillips might go as well, but you've got to remember that they weren't really in the first team squad second half of last season. They were out on loan. So numbers-wise, they're in exactly the same position they were last year. And that squad nearly won a quadruple. The only difference is they're a forward down to bring in this backup right back in Calvin Ramsey. But then that was the one hole in the squad we looked at last year. There wasn't a natural right back understudy, and now that's what they've got. And then you might say, well, they're forward down. Well, how often are we seeing the likes of Minamino and Origi not making the squad or not even getting off the bench? Like, there were players there that weren't being used. It was better to have this overall scope on the squad. So they've got the depth there. And there'll be questions about quality, whether they need a midfielder. But it's the age-old debate, isn't it? Quantity over quality. And then you look at Liverpool's situation, wait until 2023. You can't change your squad in the whole summer. Forward has been what they're doing in 2022. They've got Diaz, they've got Carvalho, they've got Nunes. Mane's gone. They're looking to a future beyond Firmino, potentially beyond Salah, one step at a time. And this first step seems to be, on paper at least, a successful transition.
I mean, Theo mentioned their players not necessarily being used last season, Emmet. On the flip side of this, there are a couple of areas within the squad that are looking relatively thin on the ground. And, the next season is going to be pretty much 2 games every week. Would you like to see a couple new faces brought in? Because, we're clearly going to need that depth for the amount of games, aren't we?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a tricky one because obviously the club have said that business is finished. And Theo makes a very convincing argument as to why, there should be no more business done this summer, apart from obviously selling players, fringe players. But I would like to see maybe another midfielder come in. Because I feel like obviously Gini Wijnaldum wasn't really replaced last summer, and I think in the first half of the season, Liverpool kind of struggled, not in terms of midfielders per se, but in terms of available bodies. And you had Jordan Henderson basically playing every week because Fabinho was out for a bit, Thiago was out, Naby Keita was out, James Milner's obviously aging. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain is kind of in and out. I mean, he didn't kick a ball the last 2 months of the season. Wasn't even in the squad some days. So I kind of would like one more midfielder in, just not even a quality midfielder, but a decent midfielder, just in case you need a midfielder for the Carabao Cup, the early rounds of the FA Cup. Someone just to come in, and then I suppose you could then rely more on Curtis Jones. But again, there's question marks over where his best position is. Is it more an attack position, or is it on the left side of midfield, the right side of midfield? No one really seems to know where his best position is. So you could maybe go down that route of relying more on Curtis Jones. But I would generally tend to like one more central midfielder in, just maybe for even a stopgap solution for a year. We've read a lot this week that Liverpool are going to go all in for Jude Bellingham next summer. So maybe someone in just for a year to plug gaps essentially in games. Not an automatic starter, obviously, but if Henderson's out, if Thiago's out, Fabinho's out, someone just to step in when they're not available.
I mean, that's the exact thing as you mentioned there. The midfield is the main area of concern that fans are raising within the squad. Theo, there's such a hectic schedule, as I mentioned before the question to Emmet. 2 games every week. Surely there's not enough legs within the squad, because we can use 5 subs now as well. So perhaps having a bolster of players on the bench is actually kind of a good thing this season.
That was the exact situation they were in last year when they nearly won a quadruple, when they were a goal away from a Premier League title, a goal away from the Champions League. This squad went to the very wire. You could argue that probably they peaked in that first half against Man City at Wembley in the FA Cup semi-final, and there were a few tired legs for the last weeks of the season. And it was quite telling that 3 players who picked up the injuries at the end of the season were the 3 that you don't tend to rotate in Van Dijk, Fabinho and Salah. But Liverpool still got there. They still nearly achieved something that's never been done before, and they still went closer to it than any side has ever done. And yeah, I get the midfield debate. I can understand why fans want another body. And when you got this 2023 vision and Jude Bellingham's there, and you see City signing Calvin Phillips. But look at the options they've got with 5 substitutions. It just means you're going to be seeing more from Curtis Jones. You're going to be seeing more from Harvey Elliott. You're going to be seeing more from Fabio Carvalho when he comes in. They've got the bodies there. You'd like to think Jordan Henderson, this season is going to be the start of him gradually being eased out. Like, it was through necessity that he started every game pretty much, where he was coming off the bench every game last season. But if Harvey Elliott doesn't pick up that injury against Leeds United in like September, he probably plays a hell of a lot more. It was only towards the end of the season we saw them guys less when they came back, because it was stability that Liverpool needed to get them over the line. And Klopp always does this when they go for trophies at the business end. He sticks with that trusted 11, 15, whatever players and only makes those minimum rotations to get that consistency, to get that stability. But early, it's rotation. Everything's up for grabs. It'll be 2 games every week, but that was the case last season. And it's still League Cup doesn't get underway for Liverpool until November. 4th round's the first game back after the World Cup final. Well, Salah, Diaz, they won't have played for a month. So you're not really needing it there. And then you're in quarterfinal, semi-final stage in January, which is what you're in anyway. And you can strengthen then anyway. If someone comes available 6 months early, they should be fine for this first half of the season. And you say about a stopgap. Well, why sign someone for a year to just plug that gap when you've got 2 youngsters in Elliott and Jones? They could step up, give them the minutes, see what they can do, see if they deserve that place. And then you've still got, Thiago's only just wrong side of 30. Henderson, plenty of life left there. Milner's the stopgap by signing this 1-year contract extension until he's 37, and he proved in the last couple of months of the season how much he deserved that. Oxlade-Chamberlain, you're not getting a better replacement for him. If you sold him now for 10 million, you're not upgrading on him for that fee. It makes sense to keep him for the year and let him see if he can actually get into the team, get a contract. Keita, we know they want to keep him. And then there's always the formation debate as well. We've got the bodies there. We can see that Liverpool could do 4-2-3-1. Well, if they go 4-2-3-1, it's very easy to say, right, Henderson, you're on the bench. And then you've got your understudy for Fabinho. Henderson is not going to play as much this season from the start as he did last year. And you'd like to think it is going to be that beginning of Harvey Elliott becoming a first-team starter more weeks. Curtis Jones taking that up step. Naby Keita maybe showing, this is him. This is his Liverpool career really starting, really being a consistent player who deserves this new contract. But we'll see, because we say that every season about Naby Keita. There is enough there for 2022-23. That is why they are waiting until 23, because then Milner is 37. Henderson's a year older. Thiago's a year older. Jones and Elliott are a year older as well. And they can do this next transition for this overall, evolved squad, this soft launch of Klopp's next great side.
I mean, it's a very, very positive outlook on the midfield there, and it makes a lot of sense. But then there is also a flip side to this, Emmet, where a few of those players mentioned are running out of contract. You've got Naby Keita out of contract this year. Obviously, James Milner's going to be out of contract. Oxlade-Chamberlain's running out, I think, 2024, correct me if I'm wrong. Henderson, Thiago, they are getting older. Is now the time to bring in that extra midfielder, perhaps a number 6, to cover the Fabinho role, because his legs clearly went to the back end of last season. We don't want to be in a position where we've only got 4 or 5 midfielders come 2023 or 2024, do we, Emmet?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the worry too, is that there is no real vice Fabinho in the squad. I mean, Jordan Henderson was kind of used in the role when Fabinho was out. I think it was in October. I think Fabinho was out for a while. And obviously, Henderson can try his best, but he doesn't have the same attributes to interpret the role in the way that Fabinho does. And I think Liverpool's midfield isn't the same when Fabinho is out of the side. But then again, how do you find a cover for Fabinho, who's only going to come in and play maybe 7-8 games a year when Fabinho's unavailable, because if Fabinho is available, Klopp uses him. So as Theo said, trying to buy someone for cheap enough to only use maybe 6, 7, 8, 10 times a year is going to be difficult. So I think, Theo has a very good point in that maybe Liverpool Klopp should tinker systems and maybe go to like a double pivot in midfield. This would obviously mean there's not 3 starting midfielders every week, and it gives more of the current midfielders time to rest. And so say if you start with, for example, Thiago and Fabinho, then you can bring Henderson on, as a late substitute, or he can start the next game. And it would also be more beneficial to the amount of attackers Liverpool have now. If you just take the likes of Jota, Firmino, Salah, Nunez, and Diaz, and then even Harvey Elliott, I think switching, going out of the 4-3-3 to a 4-2-3-1 actually makes more sense now for the squad that Liverpool have. So that could be a solution in terms of maybe not buying a midfielder this summer, and as Theo said, holding off to next summer. By going with the formation change would actually be a very smart move on Klopp's part. But then again, if he is going to stick to the 4-3-3, then I do feel like maybe another midfielder, especially for a vice Fabinho, is needed. I mean, we saw that with the players that Liverpool we kind of linked with at the beginning of the summer. Tchouaméni, obviously he went to Real Madrid, and Calvin Phillips was briefly linked, kind of plays in the same position. So it maybe is something that Liverpool are looking at. But yeah, it's that you're not going to spend a lot of money bringing in someone to play as backup to Fabinho. It's just not going to happen.
Well, yeah, exactly that. But the thing is, Theo, if we were to go for this formation change, that could promote another problem then with depth in attacking, because we've lost Divock Origi as the man off the bench with the Plan B solution. I know Darwin Núñez isn't the Sadio Mane replacement as such, so that's another thing we might even need to look at, strengthening the attacking options, particularly if we were to play this 4-2-3-1 formation. Surely there's a need for another attacker to come in, especially with Minamino looking like he's on the way out as well.
I'm not sure about that either, to be honest. I think Núñez, Jota, Firmino down the middle, Diaz, Jota on the left, Carvalho, Firmino, Jones, Elliott as number 10, Salah, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Elliott on the right. Yeah, it's a drop-off in quality when you take out a Mohamed Salah, but that's going to be the case. It's the exact same thing we've just said about Fabinho there, that you cannot sign a player and put big money on them when they're not going to start most games. Like, they've got lucky in a good way with Jota that they signed someone who could break up the famous front three, but be more of this squad rotation option. The fact that you can play anywhere across that front three, you can start him in some games, you can make him an impact sub in others. But it's rare that you can fill a squad with that and keep them all happy. Man City are finding that out to their cost this summer. Like, it's been a few years now where the likes of Jesus and Sterling have been linked moves away because they've not been starting every week. Bernardo Silva as well. And Pep Guardiola's had a real balancing act, and they've had to be stubborn and just keep players. And now we're seeing that, a couple of them are going to move on because they've run out of patience at not being guaranteed starts every week. The questions over quality, that is the one that persists. Like, if you lose Mohamed Salah to injury, or we have what happened last year when for 6 months he's just knackered and you don't have that rotation option, that's fair enough. But you can't really bloat your squad on ifs and buts. Like, if you've got the depth there and you trust your players to step up and make a difference for the opportunities to give them, that's fair enough. But you can't gamble on, we might lose 3 centre-backs to season-ending injuries, so rather than have 4 centre-backs, let's have 8 just to cover that. Or we need another couple of forwards there. Still got kids coming through who've got talent there, like Cade Gordon. If he has a good pre-season, he's an option. Like, we saw him play a League Cup semi-final last year. Yeah, he's very raw, but domestic cup games are there for him. If there are games when Liverpool were 2-3-0 up in the Premier League, the Champions League, and he's you got 5 subs, you bring him on for 15-20 minutes, give him some experience. The Liverpool starting 11 is very good. Nearly won a quadruple. The subs there, they've made a difference in the past. It's just about getting that balance right. You need a bit of luck. That is the case for every team. Stay clear of injuries. When you do have a few injuries, it's not all in the same position at the same time, or you're losing your spine of your team at the same time. And that's what was very fortunate for Liverpool last year compared to previous years. On the basis of a normal season, enough is there. Even without that, you've got to remember as well, no AFCON this year. Salah's not going to be playing extra time every 2 days for 6 weeks in a row, or whatever it was when you had the League
All
Cup
games going to extra time.
Exactly. He gets a nice little 4-6 week break in November, December. Luis Diaz gets the same. You look at Liverpool's squad, even with the expanded World Cup squad, so Firmino and Thiago may be more likely to get a call up. They will have a lot fewer players going to Qatar than City, for example. That break could be huge for them coming back. Like the only big City player you think, oh, you're not going to play at the World Cup is Erling Haaland. Liverpool got a few more key players there in attack. They'll have fresh legs. They'll be fine. They want to play. It's another thing Liverpool look for when they sign players, isn't it? The ones that don't break down with injuries, the ones that can play every week. And that's why Mane is potentially a bigger loss than you'd think, because he was always available and he always stepped up and got the goals. But you just got to trust the recruitment team to replace them with the right players. And Carvalho and Nunes, they look talented. Let's see what they can do.
I mean, it'd be good to get your take on this, Emmet, because obviously it's hypothetical, the switch to 4 attackers, but it's looking increasingly more likely if we don't sign a midfielder. Let's say it's 4-2-3-1. There's 4 attacking positions. We've got Diaz and Jota, who, Jota is far more effective on the left. Nunes will probably start up top. Salah on the right. Hopefully he doesn't get injured because that will promote even more problems. But is there enough quality in the depth in the squad? Because Theo mentioned, whether the quality is there. Do you think it would be good enough, let's say if Salah got injured, to play a Champions League game with a weakened attack of maybe a Curtis Jones or Harvey Elliott thrown in there, or do we need to strengthen that area?
No, I think I'm in agreement with Theo. I know this is kind of against the theme of the podcast, but I think if Liverpool, if Klopp did switch to the 4 attacking positions, I think Liverpool will be fine. Obviously, if Salah gets injured, but at the same time, you're not going to sign a replacement, even if you wanted to, get a cover for Salah. You're not going to get him cheap. And if you do get them cheap, they're not going to be of the same quality anyway. Because, Liverpool aren't going to pay 40, 50, 60 million for a backup to play. Salah really doesn't get injured that often. So they're not going to sign a quality, replacement who's going to sit on the bench for 90% of the season. So you might as well, try and bring in Kate Gordon or put Harvey Elliott on the right and just see how it goes. Because you don't really have anything to lose. And I do think there is enough cover. You have obviously Firmino as the 10, Nunes up top, Diaz on the left, Salah on the right. Then you can maybe play Curtis Jones on the left, Fabio Carvalho will obviously get game time. You have Kate Gordon there. So, yeah, obviously Minamino is about to leave. Origi's left, Mane's left. But I do think with the squad that Liverpool currently have now, if they don't sign another midfielder, I would say 4-2-3-1 is the way to go. Because the balance of the squad kind of goes in that direction. And I do think they have enough cover to make it work.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think it's going to be very interesting pre-season to see, if there is any change in shape. I think Pep Linders has already hinted, or Linders, I should correct his name, has been said a few times. But we'll have to leave the Split Opinion podcast there, I'm afraid, fellas. 2 very well-argued cases. To be honest, I'm even more confused than when I was at the start of the show. I don't really know where I stand. But I think myself and most Liverpool supporters would want at least one more signing, probably to strengthen up the midfield. It looks likely we'll stick with that 4-3-3.
I'll just say bring in another player so our website's a bit busier for the next 6 weeks.
Exactly that, Theo. Keep the rumour mill going around. Well, a big thank you to Theo Squires and Emmet Gates. And of course, a big thank you to those of you watching and listening along. Be sure to check out our daily transfer news content and various other pieces on the Blood Red channel, Liverpool Echo and Liverpool.com. But from all of us here, it's goodbye for now.